Well, good morning to you and happy Sunday. I am meteorologist Joshua Nagelberg with Carolina Weather Authority. And let's go ahead and cut right to the chase. It was a toasty one yesterday. Some of us did get to 90 degrees. But the good news is if you've been reading our articles over the last couple of days, you've noticed we are forecasting some cooler weather here. And I'm actually pretty excited about that. I do love warm weather, don't get me wrong, but nothing says savings on energy bills to me more like awesome. So excited for that. Let's go ahead and take a look at our radar. And across the country right now, we see what's left of what was a severe storm derecho, which came across Wyoming and South Dakota, North Dakota. Is now just a few showers and storms up in Minnesota. Not a problem for us, of course. Out west, some showers ongoing. And then our big system right now is Tropical Storm Cristobal, which continues to produce some pretty rough weather across the Gulf Coast, especially over into Florida, but now moving into southeast Louisiana. And North Carolina, Virginia, we did have a front drop down in our direction last night, brought some rough weather to the Tidewater region, but it's starting to kind of simmer down here. We're now at a time of day where there's not a lot of daytime heating, a lot of cloud cover, so not much going on. And look, the radar does show Raleigh is fine, Charlotte's fine, just a few scattered showers approaching Edenton, Elizabeth City, the Pamlico and Albemarle Sounds, or Albemarle and Pamlico, I should say. And then a look farther out shows the Outer Banks are looking at a few showers right now, so not a pretty beach day there. But the rest of the beaches are in pretty good shape. So let's go ahead and take a look at our weather forecast. And we'll start out with the storm forecast for today, just showing a general area of thunderstorms possible. Severe weather is going to be later on across the upper Midwest. And as Tropical Storm Cristobal makes landfall tonight across the central Gulf Coast, and there's a threat for a few tornadoes there as well. I'll talk about that even though it may not affect us, but it's definitely important. Rainfall yesterday and last night was fairly light and scattered over eastern North Carolina. A few spots picked up maybe a little bit more. Did see over an inch, though, across southeastern Virginia, and here's where the hard rains fell. But Raleigh missed out on rain. Charlotte missed out on rain. There were just a few pop-ups in the afternoon. Temperature forecast for today, it's still pretty warm out there. We're looking mostly in the 80s and maybe a few low 90s are showing up. I will show you the dew point, though. It is expected to drop, except right on the coast and in the low country here. We'll still be in the 70s. But you can see there is a cold front right here, and that is scheduled to come on through, and the triangle will start to dry out this afternoon. 19Z is 3 o'clock local time, so it is going to get a little bit less humid out there. We're not going to enjoy the spoils of this major dry air in the northeast, but it is going to start to seep our direction. So anytime I see a dew point under 60, I get a little bit excited, and I'm sure you do as well. Even though I'm a Gulf Coast guy from Louisiana, I enjoy lower humidity. Look at rainfall here over the upcoming week. This is the European model from Pivotal Weather. It does show relatively dry weather, but not everybody's going to get by dry. We will have a couple of fronts coming through later on in the week, and maybe some locally heavier storms possible in the Midlands and Piedmont. So this one run of the model does show an inch potential of rainfall across places like Raleigh, and Fayetteville could get a couple inches, and it's even showing Sumter maybe getting 3 inches. So again, this is not a very high resolution model. It's looking out all the way over the week, so this is going through Sunday night next week. And very much could change, as I'm going to show you here. We'll turn our attention now. Well, actually, I'll tell you what. Let's look real quick at the temperature forecast map before we go on to our tropical forecast. And you can see today's temperatures are still going to be a bit above average on the GFS. And let me zoom in and show you that here. There we go. Still a warm day on Sunday across the western Carolinas, although that cooler air mass starts to seep southward. And you can see we do have kind of some cooler air trying to move into eastern North Carolina. It doesn't make much progress because this is the middle of next week. Wednesday will already be above average at the 850 millibar level, which means it'll still be on the warm side. But there's some cooler air starting to make its way into the Ohio Valley. And we've mentioned the middle of June is going to be cool. It's going to be warm ahead of this front Thursday. But look, that warmth is already starting to get wiped out by next weekend. And here it comes. Next Sunday, this time when we'll be talking, should be a lot more comfortable. May not be the prettiest of weekends, and we can look at that later. We've got a front coming down and maybe some precipitation, maybe some clouds. but it is going to cool us down. So expect a break on the AC bills here next week. Here's that cool coming on down. And that's going to stick with us, looks like, the entire week before things start to moderate over the following weekend for Father's Day. So we'll get more into that here in a little bit. Let's look at Tropical Storm Cristobal. Still a very large circulation, but not very organized. Kind of looks subtropical. It's got some dry air that's moved on in. The center of the circulation's here, and it's actually only about 12 hours or less from landfall now over southeast Louisiana. It's going to move this direction. But much of the weather we've seen has been well off to the north and east. There's been wind shear from the southwest. That's pushed our storm clouds off. And in fact, we've actually seen some pretty rough weather across Florida. Yesterday, had a couple tornado warnings. Saw this picture on Twitter of a possible tornado in the Orlando area, Lake Conway, which is on the southeast side of town. Did see, looks like a tornado touchdown, and there were warnings. So regardless of the fact that this storm is moving into Louisiana this evening, it's produced some weather all the way over into Florida. So pretty interesting stuff. Let's take a look at rainfall totals from Cristobal. We're looking at maybe a very significant rainfall event in the Florida parishes of Louisiana. This, of course, is the NAM 3 kilometer. Not the top tropical model, but I have seen it show some good rain core events. Forecast those pretty well. The rain core event is just an area where very heavy rain sets up and kind of sits over in a band. And that could spell some pretty bad news here in St. Tammany Parish if you have relatives on the North Shore. Even New Orleans, 6 inches of rain is going to cause flooding. The maximum amount on this model is 15 inches of rain. This is through, I believe, Monday night, early Tuesday morning, around 1 a.m. Central. So you can see some very potentially big differences depending on where exactly the center of the storm goes. It should consolidate when it does move on shore, and by the time it gets up into Arkansas and Missouri, it's going to lose tropical characteristics and then bend northeast into Wisconsin. By the way, nothing really for us to worry about, but this will be the first U.S. landfalling storm to track so far to the west by the time it moves up into Canada. In northwest Ontario, we never see tropical systems. Everything usually gets pushed off to the northeast. But that storm we're watching in the Dakotas and Minnesota is going to pick it up and actually absorb it. So this would be yet another start of the season to the history books. We've got our earliest third named storm, and we may potentially have our furthest west storm over the Great Lakes and central Canada. So a little bit crazy here. Down the road, we are, and you may have seen in my video yesterday, we're actually watching a little bit of an area here that could slowly develop towards the end of the week. This is Bermuda, so it could kind of meander westward towards Bermuda. But after that, really nothing to worry about. So if we do get this thing to develop into a storm, it would be the earliest fourth storm on record, keeping our record pace. And the name would be Dolly. So last year, remember, Dorian was the D storm, and that didn't affect us until the end of August and early September. We're talking about the second or third week of June. Pretty crazy. So I don't feel too bad about our 15 to 20 named storm forecast. If anything, it might end up being too conservative, but we'll see. The GFS model shows our landfalling storm tonight, Cristobal. This is this evening, moving into southeast Louisiana and then weakening. High pressure builds south. It's a weak area of high pressure, but that builds into the coastal sections. And that's actually going to keep most of this moisture out today. We do have a boundary that's going to be setting up here along the Carolina border, so we don't completely dry out, but Raleigh should see at least some improvement for a couple of days. But it is going to warm back up. Here's our next boundary coming through. This is a very strong storm, by the way. The remains of Cristobal merging with a powerful trough. And we've got a boundary moving through on Wednesday afternoon and evening, and that could produce some of that heavy rain I showed you up on the European model. The Gulf is pretty quiet, though. The Caribbean's relatively quiet, but you can see right here, this is Thursday night. Bermuda could start to see some tropical moisture, and let's see if this thing can try spinning up. Yeah, here's Saturday, and we may have maybe a depression or subtropical storm. You know, again, it's not a high risk at this point, but something we're watching. Next area of high pressure is going to drop down from eastern Canada, and it looks like our next weekend could be kind of nasty. Unfortunately, for Saturday afternoon, evening, those of us in the eastern Carolinas have a boundary to deal with, and we could have locally heavy rain. But once that pushes through slowly by Sunday night and Monday, we're in great shape here with a big high dropping southeast. The next storm system over the plains will be worth watching. Again, forecasting skill 10 or 12 days out is not high, but we could be heading back into a wet pattern, or we could just have a nice big dry high and this ends up farther south. So the GFS, if you look back one model run, it's got that front farther north, but if you look back the run before, it stays off to our northwest. So again, it's a guessing game, but we are expecting that cool down to come, and we are expecting, what could end up being somewhat of a wet pattern resuming here by Father's Day weekend. By the way, this model of the GFS tries to develop another system in the western Gulf. So if you're in Louisiana or Texas, keep your eyes out. Hopefully it's just some rain that pushes west. The rain is definitely, I don't want to say needed, but the drought monitor over here in Mississippi and Alabama, a little bit of hard rain is not going to hurt. I guess we're more worried about too much too soon. We're worried about storm surge. This part of Louisiana has had a lot of rain in the last month, so we do not need that potentially 8, 10, 12 inches. I think that's about it, guys. But thanks for hanging with us here. We're going to get a lot more of these to you, especially when we look at more major weather in the Carolinas. I'm going to work on getting less caffeine in me in the morning so I can speak slowly and more articulately. But in the short term, I'm excited to bring these videos to you, and I did want to show you a little bit of our slogan here. Make sure that you CYA with CWA. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great Sunday.